Good afternoon. I'm Sarah Larson with the Arizona Center for Civic Leadership at the Flinn Foundation. Thank you for being here today. For today's CivEx, we're focusing on Arizona's young talent. Our young leaders are critical to our state's future, and understanding their needs and wants is a key component in building the future we want. Today, we are thrilled to have the Center for the Future of Arizona sharing their work towards understanding young talent in Arizona. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Sybil Francis. Dr. Francis is a founding member and president and CEO of the Center for the Future of Arizona, a nonpartisan organization that brings Arizonans together to create a stronger, brighter future for our state. For more than 3 decades, Dr. Francis has been a dedicated public policy architect who is committed to advancing innovative solutions to societal imperatives. Dr. Francis.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And I just want to thank the Arizona Center for Civic Leadership for hosting us today, for all the work that you have done in advancing civic engagement in Arizona. I'd like to thank Don Wallace, who's been a great friend for so many years. You've been great friends of CFA, and I've been honored to work with the Flinn Foundation over the years, and excited to host our discussion today about young talent and what's on the minds of young talent and how we can take advantage of that knowledge. I'd also like to thank all of you who are here today and for all you do for Arizona every day. Thank you for your passion and commitment to our state, a passion we certainly share at the Center for the Future of Arizona. So our topic today is young talent, Arizona's young talent. How do we attract, retain, develop, and ensure that young talent are thriving in Arizona? This is work that the Center for the Future of Arizona has been advancing. But before we get into the specifics of the topic, I did want to just give you a brief overview of the Center for the Future of Arizona so you can see how it kind of fits into our work and our mission. As Sarah mentioned, we are a nonprofit, nonpartisan 501c3 organization. Our mission is to bring Arizonans together to create a stronger and brighter future for our state. And our vision for Arizona is prosperity, opportunity, and for all Arizonans. We do our work in a number of ways. We listen very closely to what Arizonans say matter to them. We share trusted data about the things that matter most to Arizonans. We identify big issues of importance to Arizona. And finally, we bring data and tools to bear to help mobilize communities to affect the kind of changes they would like to see in their communities. So when I said we listen to Arizonans, we really are not in the business of ourselves as the center creating the agenda for Arizona. So how do we listen to Arizona? We've had many different ways over the years that we've listened to Arizonans, including community conversations, even conversations like that, the ones we're having today, including the ones that we conducted with our young talent. But a really big major milestone for our organization happened a little over 10 years ago in 2009 when we partnered with the Gallup organization to conduct the first of its kind, really innovative, impactful comprehensive survey of Arizonans across the broad range of issues that you can imagine are important to the future of our state. So we surveyed Arizonans about their views, about the importance of and what we need to do for our future in education, jobs, health and well-being, infrastructure, natural resources, connected communities, civic engagement, and yes, young talent, which is our topic of conversation today. We brought those findings together in what we call the Arizona We Want, which is really an expression of all those priorities that we heard matter to Arizonans. So the Arizona We Want is really a shared vision of success around what matters most to Arizonans and expresses their highest aspirations and hopes for the future. So this was a very major turning point for us and helped set our own agenda on the kinds of things that we work on, as well as provided some guidance to Arizonans about the things that matter most to Arizonans and where we have opportunities to improve. So in our own work at CFA, we have done deep work in education, workforce, and civic engagement. So we have programs across the state. We are a statewide organization. We've school leadership programs, school reimagining initiatives, career pathways programs, civic engagement work. And so we have our own deep work in that, but the Arizona We Want is really our sharing of the findings of what matters most to Arizonans to really inspire action on behalf of Arizonans across the state. But if we know what's important to Arizonans, we also have to have a way to measure how we're doing and report out on how we're doing. So that's where this idea of progress meters comes in. So we have a set of progress meters, the Arizona We Want progress meters in each of these key areas that I mentioned. If you go to our website, you can click on any of these icons and you will find a set of curated data that can help you get a snapshot for how we're doing in each of these areas. Some of you may be familiar with the education progress meter. We actually are proud of our partnership with Expect More Arizona in having co-developed that progress meter together through a comprehensive engagement with education leaders, advocacy groups, and experts across the state. When I say curated data, what I mean is that for each of these progress meters, we have a finite set of data because we are awash in data. There's no dearth of information out there about these issues, but how can we provide data that are accessible, understandable, usable, trustworthy, publicly available, and actionable. So for example, in education, we have 8 or 10 metrics: early childhood quality education, 3rd grade reading, 8th grade math, high school graduation, college going, college attainment or post-secondary attainment, and teacher pay. So all of these issues can be grasped at a state level, and even localities can go look at how their community is doing in each of these areas. So that brings me to the Young Talent Progress Meter. And this is our most recent progress meter that we rolled out. It's actually the last one in this set of 8. And we went about it slightly differently than we did for the other progress meters through the Gallup poll process. And Kristi Tate, who I'll turn to in a moment, can talk about that process a little bit more, but we really approached it somewhat differently to really learn about what's on the minds of young people. And by that, we mean 18 to 39-year-olds, and those can be broken down into a couple of subsets. But what brings young people to Arizona? What helps them thrive here? What makes them want to stay? What might prompt them to leave? And what are the things that can really help them succeed in their lives? So the voices of young people across Arizona have helped inform the development of the Young Talent Progress Meter and help us also report on how we're doing across those areas. So now I'd like to turn it over to Kristi Tate, who's our Director of Civic Health Initiatives, to share more about the development as well as the data, and to bring in some of our young talent advisors to discuss this with you. So thank you again, all of you, for being here today, for all that you do. And I look forward to the conversation. Thanks, Kristi.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sybil and Don and Sarah, and the center really for the opportunity to discuss this topic. I'm so excited that I get to facilitate a discussion with several of our young talent advisors today, and just wanted to share a little bit more about what we learned through the Young Talent Progress Meter to really frame this discussion. As Sybil just shared, we really took seriously the role of listening first to young Arizonans to understand what their experiences have been, what are the top concerns for them for the future of the state, what might cause them to stay and what might cause them to leave as we think long-term about the future. So we went out into 20 listening sessions across the state. From that, gathered this really rich data into 36 issues of concern and sent that out through a survey that got over 2,000 responses and thousands of open-ended comments to really identify what are the key issues that need more visibility and more data-driven decision-making. So we were able to identify 13 metrics that are now included in the Young Talent Progress Meter that has just been launched, with data to then provide a frame and prompt that discussion about how are we doing on those issues. So I'll just share a couple of the themes before we really dig in with the discussion. One of the key themes that emerged from this process was really a sharp focus on equitable access to opportunity. So whether that was talking about the K-12 education system, about access to higher education, or the broad array of issues that make it possible to build a life here for the long term. So issues of cost of living and cost of housing. So that's something that our advisor, Khara, will chat a little bit more about today in Flagstaff. We also heard quite a bit, and the second rated issue behind the quality of K-12 education, which was the top, was this concept of workplace culture, and that really being a driver of whether or not young Arizonans saw a path here for the long term. So culture that created a sense of purpose and connection and community, but that also provided space to grow and felt like that, you know, skills were valued and nurtured really for the long term. And so that's something we're really interested to dig in further with our young leaders and our workplaces to understand what does that look like and how do we make sure to create those spaces. Another theme that I know is front and center for many of you who are joining us today and with our partners at the Center for Civic Leadership was really this focus on impact and leadership. So simply the response to this project for us told a story, the fact that we had thousands of young Arizonans who wanted to be a part of the discussion, who wanted their voices heard, and who are really focused on having leaders that represented diverse voices, that represented the values of Arizonans, and were thinking long-term about the future. And then finally, really heard a lot about the idea of health, of individual health, but also broader community health and environmental health. So our young leaders told us, you know, sustainable water supplies was ranked number 3. As a top concern, thinking long-term about how we balance planning for natural resources alongside economic growth, but on an individual and community level, also broadening the scope of what health means. So mental health in particular emerged as really a sharp focus throughout the discussion as an area of unmet need and really for critical attention moving forward. So that gives you a sense of some of the themes and the findings, but what we'll do today is get to hear from our wonderful advisors to tell us a little bit more about their experiences. These advisors have played a critical role throughout the process. We have 25 leaders across the state who have helped us join focus groups, send the survey out, and to really make sense of all this information with us to say, here are the issues that we most need to pay attention to as a state, here's what we're hearing, and how do we get that message out to a wider audience. So before I introduce them and we jump into that discussion, we would love to try and get a feel for who's out there, who's listening right now. We have a couple of polls of the audience. So the first is we'd like to know what region of the state you're joining from today for all of you who are listening. So if you could go ahead and click on that poll in Zoom and we'll get sort of a live feed of the responses, that would be great. And we'll give it just a bit for folks to click on over to that. Perfect. This is great. So we're starting to see responses come in. Thank you for participating. It's so interesting to see. So about 77% of those replied said urban parts of the state, 16% saying rural, 7% identifying small city. Fantastic. We'd also like to get a feel for what sector you represent in joining us today. So if you would fill out this next poll, we'll get a feel for who's in the audience from the sector side. And you should be able to, hopefully for most of you in your Zoom settings, there's a little polling feature where you're able to access this. So hopefully the majority of you are able to access. And as you're filling that out, this next poll, I wanted to share that as we enter into that panel discussion, really encourage all of you through the chat and through the Q&A features to share questions as the panel discussion goes. We would love to incorporate questions from the audience as time permits. And then we will also make sure to follow up with you if we don't get a chance to respond to the questions in the panel discussion. We will take note of them and follow up with you. So please do submit questions and thoughts and reactions as we go. Great, so the poll results, really great mix here, variety of public, private, nonprofit education leaders who are with us today. So thank you so much. It's really helpful for us to get a feel for who's with us, who's interested in the topic. So with that, I'm gonna introduce our panel. So they will all hopefully turn on video and join us here. I'll just share names and titles and then have them really introduce their roles and why this topic is so important. But so excited to have David Martinez, the Director of Community Engagement, Civic Capacity Building with Vitalyst Health Foundation. Khara House, Director of Community Engagement with Bella Investments Group in Flagstaff. Zach Yentzer, Executive Director of Tucson Young Professionals, and Reetika Dhawan with Arizona Western College, Associate Vice President for Workforce Development, Career and Technical Education. So as you can see, really incredible group. We've been so privileged to get to partner with you all in this journey and are so excited to hear your thoughts today. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it to each of you to just kick us off. Tell us a little bit about your work and then why this issue of young talent is so central to your goals and objectives as well. So David, why don't we kick it off with you?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kristi. Thank you to the entire team at the Center for the Future of Arizona and the Flinn Foundation and the Arizona Center for Civic Leadership for having me. I am so glad to be joined on this awesome panel and to be a young talent advisor with CFA. I am originally from Marana in rural Southern Arizona, a first-generation Wildcat, and I've been living in Phoenix for the past 10 years. I now am a director at Vitalyst Health Foundation, where I help build the capacity of community-based leaders, organizations and coalitions, as well as the civic health of organizations. So a lot of the work of CFA and my work now at Vitalyst intersects. I'm a native Arizonan, and my biggest, I'm an evangelist for Arizona, as I like to say, huge fan of the state 48, and I'm so committed to keeping my peers, keeping us in Arizona to help us make it the state that we know it is and can be. So that's why I'm really excited to be part of this conversation and the larger efforts to retain young talent here in Arizona.
Thank you so much, David. Khara, if you'd like to go next.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here with you. My name is Khara House. I serve as the Director of Community Engagement for Bella Investment Group up in Flagstaff, Arizona. Like many on this panel, I certainly am coming to this wearing many hats. I currently serve on the board of Flagstaff Young Professionals. I'm a member of the Flagstaff Housing Commission and most recently joined the board of Flagstaff Shelter Service, in addition to other work that I do with other community and advocacy organizations. My job really involves in a lot of ways building bridges between several aspects of the community, both being a voice for the many hats that I wear and seeking voices from those areas of the community that are not often brought to the table. So I am very happy to be here with you today in terms of the work that I do and how I see that reflected in the work that we're doing here today. I'm going to be discussing housing with you, and housing is definitely an area where young talent is on the rise and very much a needed voice. So I look forward to engaging in that conversation as we go forward.
Thank you so much, Khara. That's great. Zach?
Sure, thanks, Kristi. Good afternoon, everyone. Zach Yentzer here, Executive Director of Tucson Young Professionals. Like David and Khara, wearing a lot of different hats. Been very privileged to be a young talent advisor for the Center for the Future of Arizona as well, and also be a Flinn-Brown Fellow, part of the 2020 cohort with the Arizona Center for Civic Leadership. So this was a really fun colliding of a lot of different worlds. And as Kristi mentioned, and the Executive Director, and I think I did too, of Tucson Young Professionals, what I believe is the largest young professional network in the state of Arizona, until someone proves that wrong. We're closing in on 650 members, young professionals aged 21 to 45 in Tucson and Southern Arizona that are committed to the health and stability and thriving of our region. Our mission is to create a prosperous, innovative, and inclusive community for young professionals in the greater Tucson region. And so developing, attracting, and retaining young talent is very aligned with this. I think TYP is really fueled by some high level visions for the future. I think that the Tucson and Southern Arizona region is at a tipping point. I think the decisions we make and the next 5 to 10 years will shape the next 50. In so many of the areas that young professionals all over the state said were important to them in this report. And so the future for us requires big ideas and fresh voices to drive them. And so the ability to bring together now hundreds, nearly thousands of young professionals committed to Tucson's best possible future is really critical. We can't do that if we don't develop, attract, and retain young talent. And if our community is not good at that either, then our mission is seriously hampered. And so really excited to have worked on these issues with CFA for the last year, and excited to get into a few of those areas with the panel in the next few minutes.
Great, thank you so much, Zach. And Reetika, if you don't mind saying hello.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, first of all, to Dr. Francis, Kristi, Flinn Foundation, and everyone for giving me this opportunity. I migrated to US in 2007 as a high school math teacher and moved to community college. And I identify myself with the ambition and drive of our second language learners, or our bicultural students, and students who dream of all they might accomplish with the chance of higher education, transform lives, create thriving communities, and eliminate poverty. I am motivated by the rank of our Arizona Western College, which it holds in Arizona among the peer colleges, being the #1 in first generation students, #1 in the Pell receptionist, and the student of color, and the district, which has the unemployment rate, highest unemployment rate. I work to create powerful system which change that, reimagine how agility in a college can be in the service to the regional economy. And so I'm very fortunate to be part of this survey, this progress meter, to share, being a bilingual to share with the other community.
Thank you so much, Reetika. Thank you all. Well, as I'm sure everyone can gather, the many hats you wear, the many issues that you all are passionate about, and just your incredible dedication to this topic brings so much to chat about. So we're going to dig in a little bit more deeply with some of the issues that have popped up through this process. So Khara, we'll start with you. I shared that this focus on access to opportunity, on economic mobility was really clear throughout the focus groups, throughout the survey as a key issue of concern to young people. Would love to hear from you about some of the housing issues and affordability issues you see happening in Flagstaff, and what are some of the promising responses in the works to that?
Sure, absolutely. It's a really good question. Housing costs in Flagstaff, as many on this webinar may know, have been and continue to be an issue, particularly when it comes to affordability and what is more and more frequently being referred to as attainability. It's estimated that the cost of living in Flagstaff is roughly 15% higher than the national average, and it creates a real problem for employment retention, economic development, and even trickling down into broader areas like healthcare. In Flagstaff and increasingly throughout the state of Arizona, I would say, we're seeing the discussion of housing focusing more and more on the idea of housing as healthcare. And in no time could that be more relevant, more timely, and more earnest a discussion than right now in light of COVID-19. In Flagstaff, it's led to a recent citizens petition calling for a housing emergency, similar to the recent climate emergency declaration from the city of Flagstaff. And basically what that means is that the city is recognizing that, we have issues of affordability and attainability of housing that are impacting all of the people of Flagstaff and throughout Northern Arizona. This certainly could make housing prospects sound pretty bleak. And in some ways, I would concede that to be true. But there is also a lot of hope in the discussions that are happening because they are inspiring an increased interest in pursuing affordable housing options, meaningful partnerships with housing developers and property managers, and a lot of other creative means of alleviating some of the housing burden. Folks are getting really creative when it comes to proposing housing solutions, and we're seeing shifting trends in marketing and presentations of housing options. one of the things that I find really inspiring is the rising generations of young Arizonans and nationally who are focused very much on philanthropy, the idea of making a difference where you live, work, and play. And we are seeing that same focus come into housing. People want affordable housing options, they want flexibility, and they really want to live in communities that are involved in the broader community and working towards goals of corporate responsibility, philanthropy, and things like that. So I take it as a positive sign that while things are challenging right now, we are definitely moving in a very positive direction.
Great. Thank you so much, Khara. So that's actually a perfect segue into chatting with David a little bit more. David, in your role with Vitalyst Health Foundation, part of what we really uncovered in this process was the understanding of health was so much broader in talking to young Arizonans of whether that was individual, community health and well-being, environmental health, and know that Vitalyst has been such a leader in that broader understanding of kind of the social determinants of health. So I'd love to hear your experience on the work and what you see happening around the state that's really encouraging to you as well.
Yeah, Kristi, Khara, you hit it right on the head as housing as healthcare. We definitely see a growing chorus of folks who see health as more than just healthcare, and that's really been a primary goal of Vitalyst Health Foundation. We are a hospital conversion foundation. As folks in the Phoenix metro region know, this old St. Luke's or the St. Luke's hospital system used to be nonprofit. When we sold in the mid-90s to a private company, a portion of that sale formed what is now Vitalyst Health Foundation. And through the evolution of that branding away from St. Luke's to now Vitalyst, so has our evolution of how we see healthcare as health as more than just healthcare. At Vitalyst, we call it the elements of a healthy community. Kristi, you just said social determinants of health. So people call it a couple of different things. But there are things like economic and educational opportunities, something that definitely Zach hit on is really important for the Tucson region. Community safety is a really big, timely issue right now, and really how our communities are designed so that we may enjoy open spaces, which we know young people like, that we may eat healthy local food. I'm a localist, love checking out, well, not so much now, but local restaurants and establishments. And to be able to enjoy public transportation, which we know is really critical throughout the state. Those things, believe it or not, contribute more to health outcomes than access to health care, which blew my mind when I first started working at Vitalyst Health Foundation. But the data is there. And I think one of the things that makes me really excited about the Retaining Young Talent Progress Meters is that we see it. Our generation sees it, we're living it. And for Arizona to remain our home and the place for us to be, we need to focus on, yes, health access to healthcare, mental health services, and healthcare insurance. But we also need more diverse voices at the table. We need to keep the cost of living and housing within reach, like Khara said. So all of these things are adding to the chorus that health is more than just healthcare.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Well, and that speaks so much to kind of how these pieces fit together in the Arizona we want, and the image that Sybil described at the beginning that really shows that these issues of top concern for all of us are so interconnected. And Zach, in your work, really leading a movement of young professionals in Southern Arizona, and with your many hats, would love to hear you speak about this focus on civic impact and really on civic leadership. What are the ways that you see, to David's point, new voices, diverse voices coming into the conversation, whether it's an informal or formal leadership roles? How do you see that really emerging among rising leaders?
Yeah, Kristi, thanks for the question. And I kind of started in my first response to your first answer, kind of at a high level, but to put some numbers to it, the state of Arizona estimates that the Tucson region will grow by 50% by the year 2055, which is give or take about 500,000 people. And so I think a lot of our leadership, for a variety of reasons, mostly good people working on good things, get stuck in triaging the present. rather than thinking about how present activity shapes the future. And I think for young talent, we have no choice because the future is longer ahead of us than the past is behind us. We'll be here in 2055, God willing. And so I think those are some real numbers that put a real drive behind certainly our members at Tucson Young Professionals. I think there's a few ways to answer your question, Kristi, that I'm really excited by. One quite simply is, and there was a great spread in Politico on the Hernandi, a family of young politicians here in Southern Arizona. Daniel is a Flinn-Brown Fellow, and so that family continues to grow. But folk looked at young, bipartisan, pragmatic leaders. Daniel's the oldest, he's 30. His sisters are, I think, 28 and 27. David Martinez might have that number on lock a little better than I do, but between 25 and 30, and they're jumping in and they're serving and they're doing an incredible job. In fact, I didn't know Daniel's age until it was in print. I thought he was older than 30. And so, an obvious answer is I think we're starting to see young, smart, bipartisan leaders start to step up. And I think that's a trend in Arizona. I think Arizona's political leadership has a proud legacy of being a little mavericky in the sense of getting involved and doing it in a bipartisan way. So I think that's an easy answer. At TYP, we certainly want to be a top of funnel to get young professionals civically engaged in issues that matter to them across a spectrum of advocacy and public policy issues. And then certainly we hope a number of them will get involved politically, but whether it's working on transportation issues, innovation and venture capital, jobs, there's housing is one that pops up pretty strong for us. TYP is one of many organizations providing unelected ways, non-elected ways to engage and put some muscle behind issues that are important to us. I'll wrap up with this as well. I think what we're building organically and would love to shape a little bit more even in Southern Arizona is a pipeline where you have hundreds of young professionals gathered. Some of them are going to want to engage more. And so we're trying to formalize better partnerships with organizations like Greater Tucson Leadership, Civic and Political Leadership Academy, all the way to, yes, the Flinn-Brown program as well, of really creating a pipeline of leadership development for those who want to sit on boards and commissions, want to run for office, want to get involved. We just haven't had a critical mass of great young leaders being developed in Southern Arizona, and so we're working on changing that. The last story I'll share to answer your question, Kristi, is our partnership with organizations like the Southern Arizona Leadership Council and the Tucson Metro Chamber of Commerce, I think really highlight how we get rising and established leaders to work together on issues. So for example, with the Southern Arizona Leadership Council, we get a certain number of seats in their general member meetings. Right? These are 140 of the top leaders in Southern Arizona. It is not an easy process to become a member. And they've said, we want to invest in the next generation by providing some seats. And oh, by the way, we'll provide some mentorship as well. And oh, by the way, we want you to be a part of our general meetings so you can tell us what you think about these certain issues. And we don't expect you to agree with us, and we'd love it if you didn't. We want to know what's on your mind. Tucson Young Professionals has been really gifted with an opportunity to take a leading role in our chamber's talent attraction and retention workforce to get to really speak into that. And so I think if we can have rising leaders, and we do in Southern Arizona, who are open-handed in their approach, who are mentorship driven, and who want to work together, I think good things happen. And it's one of the benefits that we really talk about in Tucson that I would encourage all regions of our state to have. And so many of our talent advisors have said that leaders that are really open-minded, open-handed, and mentorship driven helps to make sure that we have a leadership voice that is future focused and that is developing the next generation. So good things happening, and that would be my encouragement.
Thank you so much. Yes, absolutely. And I will say, I know for the center, our experience, even with this, the Young Talent Advisors with you all, has been so powerful and really as a sounding board, as an ongoing, team to offer guidance, input, strategic thinking on this work has been really powerful for us as an organization. And so hearing you share other models for that is really exciting to see that really taking off. Reetika, would love to chat with you a little bit about this idea of workplace culture and ongoing career advancement. As I shared, that was a really prominent theme also that we're now tracking through the Young Talent Progress Meter. Everything from the sense of really purpose and community that comes from work, but having those opportunities for growth and long-term advancement and really seeing that future here in Arizona. So I'd love to hear from you. We know there's amazing leaders in Yuma. I had a chance to chat with some of you this morning. What do you see happening in the workforce development space in Yuma? What do you think are some of the promising strategies to really create those pathways for young people?
Thank you, Kristi. There's a lot of things happening in Yuma. And then as we mentioned in this morning also, our focus at Arizona Western College is the quality of higher education. We are looking at the initiatives like Yuma Promise, La Paz Promise, where we are looking at high school graduates to go through our college for free of tuition. So they don't have to pay any out-of-pocket tuition and fee expenses. And even if you are under 18, per credit, you're paying $25. We are preparing students for career mobility, adopting a guiding principle of learning so that we can help them grow, self-reflect, and make them better critical thinker. Build that connection with the industry partners so we understand what employment trends are and what's the pathway we can build up for this young, talented, group of individuals. We are engaging very closely with our community and organizations and offer that challenging and then innovative, agile culture for our even faculty, staff, so that they can understand what is the vision is. Our president is very visionary, and he developed a great strategic plan, which include not only employees, students, but the whole district. And then what's the output is that young voice can be heard. We have shared governance. It's not like leaders are taking all the decisions. It's throughout, everyone is involved in those process. The training opportunities are not only given to the leadership, but throughout the employees. So they have that feedback to grow, and there's a growth opportunity. And we need to understand that that Gen Zs and millennials, they are not about jumping up the title. They are into a better work environment. They are looking to contribute to the vision. They are looking to demonstrate their commitment over the long term. So we need to look at these young workers, how to give them more responsibilities. As a leader, we can use a mentoring to help them to gain a better understanding of our businesses, institute, and give them more insight into higher level of decision making. And then accept that failure is okay. That's a learning experience to show these millennials, and then that give them that inclination towards the innovation, risk taking, and exploring the unknowns. So in Yuma, we are emphasizing to more on completing the task instead of specified amount of time, and embrace this diversity. So young people, we know them for their energy, curiosity, and their passion. And we want a free atmosphere where their opinion do not only gain an audience, but also count towards something. So this is how we want to fit them to contribute towards the community in which we work. So we all are working together to build up so that we prepare the next leadership. We understand that at institution, we can't tell them to stay for 4 years at the college. That time is gone. They want to get right away in a 6 month or a year, their certification, their degree, and they want to have a job. So they get bored. We can't teach them a lecture. We have to cope up with the new technology, AI for them. So we are looking at those innovations in Yuma, Arizona, to work with our industry partners and work with our young individuals. How can we reach out to that?
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Well, I love that theme that you're touching on, Reetika, of agency and having a meaningful opportunity to be a part of that process, whether it's shaping community life, civic life, shaping the work environment and work culture, and shaping your career. That's really exciting to hear. So I know we have a couple of follow-up questions coming from the audience, so we'll dig in with those and encourage others. Please feel free again to enter questions into the chat. If we don't get to them, we'll make sure that we follow up with you offline. But one of the questions that came in, and Khara and David, either one of you can respond to this, but this whole idea that you touched on of looking at housing as healthcare, what do you see as opportunities really within the healthcare sector and within the healthcare industry to support housing more broadly, financially, to support economic mobility? What do you see as some of the strategies there?
Sure, I can kick us off on answering this. I see it somewhat in reverse, actually, when it comes to partnering housing and healthcare. I think David noted the importance of education and infrastructure and ensuring access and all of those sorts of things. And I think part of the responsibility falls back to the housing industry itself in forming those sorts of partnerships with the community, with housing or with healthcare agencies, to make sure that that they're working together to find creative solutions for homelessness, creating access to healthcare resources, whether that is, providing literature within a community that lets them know what resources are out there, or partnering with community organizations that that focus on both housing and healthcare. There's agencies like Section 8 Housing Program, the Guidance Center, Catholic Charities, and many others that work throughout the state that partner those sorts of resources that are providing the clients that are served through those programs with opportunities to get healthcare resources at the same time as they are doing rapid rehousing programs to get folks out of cycles of homelessness, to get them mental and behavioral health care resources and things like that. So I think it's a two-way street of partnership across the industries that we are just working to find creative solutions to battle those things.
Absolutely. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, that was a great answer for absolutely. And I think it kind of hits to what you were saying too, Reetika, is it's all about partnerships. If you're in the healthcare industry, as the person who asked the question, say, you have to think more holistically than just healthcare. Or if you're in housing, you have to also consider health aspects. A perfect example of this to the question is a great collaboration, a great partnership that happened between Chicanos por la Causa, CPLC, and United Healthcare, where United Healthcare, through their community reinvestment dollars, invested $50 million to retrofit an apartment on the west side of Phoenix in partnership with CPLC to not only set up affordable housing in the much needed area, but used an allotment of units for patients that United Healthcare was seeing had residual ER visits, mostly because they didn't have a primary care physician or access to adequate healthcare. So they would just go to the ER, which of course is super expensive for a health plan and for taxpayers. So with CPLC, United Healthcare set aside certain units for those patients they saw return ER, and it's kind of a housing first model. And the data proved right. They saw a huge decrease in their ER visits, saving them money, saving taxpayer money as well, and doing just what is right. Housing people that need housing. That is a great example. And I know a lot of different health plans across the state are looking at how they can scale that model with their community reinvestment dollars. And this is kind of supplement to that, but a fellow Flinn-Brown Fellow, Director Jamie Snyder, who heads our state Medicaid system access, is really looking at this too, this whole person care initiative, so that as many Medicaid reimbursable options can be made available to the health plans so that people can access care, including just medical needs that they have, but things like housing, transportation to those medical needs, food and whatnot. So there's a lot of efforts around this area.
Thank you so much. Such fantastic examples. And Reetika, as a follow-up for you, there is a follow-up question there in Yuma. how you see this playing out, whether it's the intersection of housing and healthcare or broader issues of quality of life, of opportunity. If you could speak to that, of what you see really impacting young people in Yuma, that would be fantastic.
Absolutely. That's a great question. I think Jim asked that question. I just read on the chat. Jim, absolutely. We are even doing a survey with Yuma 50 and looking at the housing. This is one of the major issue in Yuma County for the housing. There's not housing available for even for the anyone. I will not say even under certain employment rate, or even you will say for anyone, not only that, for the healthcare also having a bilingual, and we are very close to the border. So some of the individual can't even speak English. So for them, they sometimes hesitant to go see doctor. So the promothoras, that's something we are trying to start using more often. And we find that they are so hesitant, and the healthcare is so expensive. They are not using it, as David mentioned. Same issues here. Those it's so expensive for them to get used those healthcare facilities, and then how to bridge that gap. We are working on that as well, and those are the two major issues in Yuma as well: the housing and the healthcare. The cost of healthcare is not going down. We all know it, and the housing, there's a space. And then more commercializers keep coming on, then the housing for the small community or the middle class is not available. And that cost is going up. So there are a lot of groups who are doing a survey, and we are collecting the data, which is a Greater Yuma GYEDC, Greater Yuma Economic Development Corporation, is working on creating a survey, which they're creating a data that some of the housing, which in Yuma, most of the housing available are since 1960. And the recently, which build up the construction apartments for sort of low income housing, which was built in 2020 and in one complex. So that's a bigger issue, which we all has to resolve. That's absolutely right.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Well, such thoughtful answers. I wanted to ask a question of Zach. A follow-up question to you was, you had described kind of creating that pipeline of civic leadership and what that looks like in Southern Arizona, and what that means to really create, like you said, kind of the mentorship from more established leaders, really providing that space. What does that look like right now in terms of some of the partnerships you touched on, and how do you see that maybe playing out in more of a statewide vision? What does it mean for Arizona to be really creating a pipeline of civic leadership for the state?
Yeah, that's a good question. One of the things that we're working on across different organizations, and I believe CFA is even involved to some level, is a concept of an Arizona Young Professional Summit, of gathering young professionals from around the state to not just shape the greater Tucsons we want, or the Southern Arizonas we want, but the full Arizona that we want. And I know this is not what you were queuing up, Kristi, but we're really leaning on the elements of this progress meter as kind of an issue and a platform to go from and say, look, we've got data around these data points. We know what young talent, what young professionals around the state wants to civically engage around. Let's lean into those things. Let's lean into the strength of the organizations behind the progress meter and bring young professionals from the state together to say, how do we build our muscle around these issues? And so I think that's a tangible, easy next step that I and a few others have already started to work on, that, like I said, really springs from this effort.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Well, that brings me perfectly to another question for the group, just open-ended. But when you think about the use of data, and so Zach just offered a great example of providing a frame for more of a statewide discussion of organizing young professionals around the use of data and the work that you're doing, and how metrics and kind of long-term tracking can serve these areas of focus. Would love to hear your thoughts on that as well. And we can start with anyone who wants to jump in.
I can give it a go. Gosh, that is a really great point. And I hate to say this because I know CFA is so data driven, but we also can't get lost in the data or or make it seem that we have to kind of go. I think the data just has to be affirmed by the community. And I think that is why the process that CFA facilitated, especially with the retaining young talent data, with actually going back with the focus groups and affirming the data, is so important. Because perfect example with COVID-19, the world that we're living in now, we know that upwards of like a third of the data that is collected of COVID cases here in Arizona are unreported demographics. And when we're trying to tackle such a hot issue now, it's hard to, especially because we know that especially communities of color are being adversely impacted. So with such missing data, suppressed data, data that's not collected is a real barrier, and it really is a systemic issue, and that's why a lot of systemic issues are permeating through a lot of the efforts. I want to give props to fellow Flinn-Brown Fellow Amy Love, who is really highlighting data around juvenile injustice, frankly, because we know that through the data that primarily communities of color, especially young students who are making up increasingly the majority of Arizonans, face greater disciplinary actions in school that lead them into this pipeline to prison. So the data is important, and the community affirmation of that data, but even more so, and this is again why I love the work of CFA, is it's to inspire action. So what are we now going to do with the knowledge that we have of the inequities, that the systemic issue with data collection, and also just the injustices that are exacerbated because of it?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, David. Zach, did you want to chime in too?
Yeah, is this kind of like an open bounce around?
Sure, go for it. Jump in.
Perfect. I'll just say, you know, and Kara and I are even talking about this offline, is housing is a huge issue in Southern Arizona. And I started saying that 3 years ago. In Tucson, we talk about our low cost, you know, affordability. It's been one of our selling points. People don't believe me still when I say we are on the edge, in some ways in a housing crisis in Southern Arizona. No, it can't be. Data points, I think, allow for us to take some of the subjectivity out of it, some of the opinion out of it, and say, look, it's not just me saying this. It's not just Kara saying this. These are young professionals around the state, young talent around the state, that are saying this is an issue. And I think when you can provide some data around it, you take the subjectivity and the anecdotes out of it, and you start bringing a subject to bear in a more serious way that people can get behind. It's not just a person, but is numbers.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I see a couple of really great questions coming into the chat, and David spoke briefly to one of them around juvenile justice. And we did have a lot of really rich information that's included in our statewide survey report in terms of the importance of attention to criminal justice reform and systems reform on that front. A lot of amazing insights and perspectives on that really important topic. I know we have just a few minutes left and we could go so much deeper on any one of these topics, but I wanted to give you all a chance to respond just in close with, you know, a final piece of advice, a key takeaway for those listening. When you think about what does it mean to really meaningfully engage more young people in this conversation, more rising leaders in the conversation about really shaping the future that we want, what's one takeaway you'd really like folks to walk away with? And I'll start with Khara.
Yeah, I think my key takeaway for this conversation, and so many that we have around the idea of young talent and all of the different sectors in which we are interested in, is that every voice counts. Literally every voice counts. We're seeing growing national and local interest in re-inviting various voices to the table, whether it's diversity and inclusion initiatives, just bridging those gaps between generations and cultures and all of those things that contribute to flourishing societies. In some cases, we're seeing the extension of the first invitation to a number of diverse populations to join into these conversations. And there's so much that is at stake. You know, we've talked about housing issues throughout the state. We're talking about jobs and employment, access to care and resources, infrastructure, and all of these things. In all of these areas, our state is relying on people who have voice to lend it to the conversation. And to those who don't have a voice, we're relying on those who have their voice to speak up on their behalf and invite them into the conversation. I think it's so important that when we get access to this information and we can look at the data points and we see the disparities that exist culturally and societally throughout the state, that we have responsibilities to then take that information and do something with it and do something about it. I am very encouraged by the conversation happening in the chat of folks wanting to reach out to organizations and see how they can partner. I look forward to hearing from people and just love to see that that is something that we are working towards, is ongoing, continual civic engagement, looking at this information and seeing how can we take this, and now that we know, what can we do about it? I think that's so important, and it's really great.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. David, if you want to chime in with a closing thought.
Yeah, I love that, Khara. It's like if you, and now you know, so what are you going to do about it? I'll make two quick points. One, especially to show some love for Reetika, and also because I'm a product of rural Arizona, is the great state of Maricopa should not forget about the great ruralness that is the state of Arizona. There is incredible action, incredible people doing awesome things in rural Arizona, and they're rural by choice. They don't want to move to Tucson or Phoenix or Flagstaff. So we should respect that and provide them with resources and access to resources that they so deserve. I'll also add that that the I'll just keep it at that. I'll just show some love from rural AZ.
Zach, we'll go to you next.
Yeah, I would just say, I think often in these conversations of young voices, we talk about generational cohort change. When do older generations step aside, or when is it the young professionals' moment? And in my experience, we're not looking for the baton to be passed. We're looking to run together. I think we're looking for an intergenerational experience around solving these challenges together. And so I would urge all generations that we want to work together on these, not wait for a cohort change.
Thank you. What a great thought. And Reetika, last thought from you.
I'm same here with Zach, David, and Khara said. We need to be agile, but open to innovation, open to new ideas, and not forget rural communities, because I can tell you I have so many students in Arizona Western College who never drove outside Yuma, who never ever have flown anywhere, never have sat in a plane, and sometime our president, when he go anywhere, he said, what about our students? So I feel like, there are so many leaders in our community who want this to happen, but we need that support from every one of you that, yes, we can do this. For this young generation who haven't experienced what the real world means. No doubt rural communities are real world, but that opportunities. So to make sure that we get that opportunity to every single student what they deserve.
Great. Thank you so much. Well, I know for me, this has given me a huge boost of energy and inspiration. So I'm just really appreciative to you all for joining us today for the discussion. Just incredible work that you all are leading. For those of you listening, an amazing chat happening too. We definitely want to follow up on all of these questions and opportunities for action. The advisors, you can either connect with directly who have added their information in the chat, or through CFA. So we're arizonafuture.org. You can check out the Young Talent Advisors page and reach out to me. And I'm happy to share more about this young talent work and connect you with relevant advisors here today. And just wanted to say, as we come to a close, that this is just really the beginning of the conversation for us at the center. Our approach with all of the Arizona Progress Meters is to really bring visibility to issues of key concern, to bring data to help frame discussions, to spotlight where there are challenges and opportunities, and then to really engage with you all across the state to drive action. So would invite any of you who are interested to host a community conversation with us on the young talent findings, to bring leaders together to hear more, and to really start to identify what are the opportunities for action and further strategy that are really responsive to ultimately move the needle on these indicators. So thank you again so much. I'll bring us to a close, and thanks again to the panel, Sybil, and then Dawn and Sarah as well for hosting us today. It's been a real pleasure. Thanks, everybody.